In 2022, I can literally grab my smartphone, it's in my hand right now, open it up, be on the internet. No big whoop. It's so easy and convenient, and I take it for granted to the point where when I'm in a spot that I don't get really good reception, I get upset that I can't just go on the internet. And it got me thinking about way back in the day and what it was like when the internet first was made readily available to the average people. And that's what it made me realize how good we actually have it today. I am old enough and of this generation, the later part of Generation X, where we are old enough to remember what it's like to not have had all this technology, but also young enough to actually appreciate it and be pretty good at using it. For me, for my family, we first got internet at the end of 1995, beginning of 1996. It was so much different. We had a giant gateway computer with the huge modem, and being a huge family with 5 of us kids and 2 adults, it was almost like we needed one of those sign-in sheets to schedule time to be on the internet. Because no one had ever seen anything where all of this entertainment and knowledge and information and research tools were at your fingertips. I remember in the time before we got our gateway computer, we had a word processor, and it didn't have internet. It was kind of like the generic cousin of a personal computer, and it was fun. I got to type up a lot of stuff for school, but it was no internet. In the beginning, and people that are my age, a little younger, a little older, will remember when America Online first came out and it had the CDs where you would basically get like 400 free hours of AOL. And that was what we would do a lot of the time, was getting those free trials. Because when you've got 5 kids, 2 adults that all want to be on the computer and you've got to pay for the actual internet service, you need all the free trials you could get. You'd get them in the mail. Sometimes they'd have them in stores. I don't know when we stopped using those, but eventually it got to the point where you became kind of an expert at the internet. I always had an AOL email. I had a Hotmail one. Do you remember Hotmail? You'd basically get your email through a search engine. So AOL, Hotmail, Yahoo. And sending email back then was different because nobody knew what the hell it was. So today, everybody in the world from, age 10 up to age 100 has email. So you can just send it to anybody. Back then, you had to make sure they actually had email. Otherwise, it was pointless. But the big thing at the beginning was the dial-up internet. The fact that you had to attach a phone line to your computer to get onto the internet, which meant, God help you, if someone needed to use the phone, you had to get off the computer, which is just, I know for the young people today, it's a foreign concept because your phone has the internet. So like I said, with 5 of us kids, and at the time that we got the internet, I was 18, and my youngest sisters, they were probably 11. So all of us were in school, all of us had friends, all of us had school projects we had to do. So getting the time to just surf the internet was not a real thing. It was like, you got a half hour, then get off. And I think if people picked up the phone, they could throw you off the internet. Like there was a way to mess with your siblings. Almost like when I talked about way back in episode 1, the Nintendo Entertainment System, that if you were pissed off at someone, you could stomp your foot and it would eject the video cartridge. I think you could do the same thing where if you were pissed off, you could pick up the phone and it would throw you off the internet, which, that caused a lot of headaches. So in those early days, websites were of a premium. It wasn't everything in the world had a website. You would have to know it by www. Instead of just the name today. But the old search engines are different from what we have today. Today, basically everything's Google. Maybe you do Microsoft Bing. But back then, we had different ones. Yahoo was there. We had Magellan, Lycos, InfoSeek. Does everyone remember Ask Jeeves? And some of the websites looked like they were made by 10-year-olds because it was all kind of new. I have no computer programming skill, web design skill. That's why I always say my buddy Barry make my website. But even I today, if I wanted to, I could make a good website because it's made so easy now. So what would I do in my 30 minutes of allowed time on the internet? I mean, I guess you would check emails if you had any. You could check if people were on Instant Messenger, AIM. You could go into the chat rooms, but watch out for predators that were even in there even then. In the very beginning, there wasn't any file sharing as far as music goes when Napster would come out or LimeWire. That was a few years away, but you could listen to songs, and God help you if you wanted to download a song or download a photo with the bandwidth of those computers. I mean, it took forever, and it would take up a lot of space. I don't know how much room the hard drive had on the gateway computer, but it's nothing like what I've got now. It's probably as big as my phone. Looking back to 1996, the first full year I had access to internet, the most popular websites were AOL, Yahoo, GeoCities, Lycos, and Excite. And those are basically all search engines, but that's in order. If you go to medium.com, they have this amazing article that shows the top 5 most popular websites every year beginning in 1995. So it's a nice trip down memory lane. The major companies had websites, ESPN, MTV, they all had sites. When it came to videos and music and such, it wasn't until Reel.com and the Reel Player came around, which I believe was 97, end of 97. Then you could start to get your own music and watch videos. But at the beginning, it was like you had to find people that had recorded it off their TV or something and uploaded it. MP3s came around. Winamp was one way to get the MP3 player. I mean, there was no YouTube, no Google. Amazon.com came out late in 96. I plan on doing a deep dive into the beginnings of social media in a coming podcast episode, but there was no social media. There was chat rooms, like I said. In 1996, 97, we were still in that time where the internet was new, so people were still doing things outside rather than just being on the internet or even on their phone on the internet like today. So those early days of the internet, it was basically the bare bones. It was news, search engines, email, maybe some instant messaging, maybe some sports sites. Nothing like what it is today. And that dial-up modem, that dial-up internet sound. And if you had AOL, the welcome, you got mail, and all that stuff. Oh my God. The more I've dived into the internet of the 1990s here, the more I realize we may have to do a second segment back in the day on 90s internet, because I'm doing research, I'm checking websites, and I'm literally finding things where I'm like, oh, I got to talk about that, but there's only so much time on the podcast. We haven't even talked about the terrible screensavers or the original GIFs or GIFs, depending on how you pronounce them. So how does that sound to everyone out there? Should I do a second Internet in the 1990s segment? Because it's just scratching the surface. It's amazing to think I'm looking back 25 years ago to things that don't exist anymore on the Internet. If you go to archive.org, at the top of that page, it will have Wayback Machine. If you click on that, you can go back to those days. So, for example, say you wanted to go to AOL.com. You type it in, AOL.com on the Wayback Machine, and it will have all these timestamps of dates you can go back to. So I could go back right now to AOL.com in June of 1996 and see what the page looked like. That's a fun rabbit hole to go down. If you can remember websites that were around back then, that's the other hard part, is remembering them. I had to look up Lycos or GeoCities and ones like that. But those of you that are old enough to remember, what do you remember about 1990s internet, being on the computer, dial-up, all that stuff?